Fall is my favorite season. Something about its coziness, it's the fuzzy socks, it's a good cup of tea, and for those who celebrate, it's pumpkin spice latte season. But it's also the perfect time to reset and bring healthy habits back into focus. And with Green Chef, the number one meal kit for clean eating, you can do just that. Green Chef really makes it easy to spend less time in the kitchen and more time enjoying the season. With their new Heat and Eat meals, you can enjoy a delicious, wholesome meal in just 3 minutes. It's also perfect for supporting your wellness journey because Green Chef uses clean ingredients, fresh organic produce. It really helps you nurture yourself and your nutritional needs. I've used Screen Chef before and have found the meals to be both delicious and healthy. I chose the Mediterranean option and I was genuinely pleasantly surprised by how delicious and importantly convenient these meals were. Make this fall your healthiest yet with Green Chef. Head to greenchef.com/50BGB and use the code 50BGB to get 50% off your first month. Then 20% off for 2 months with free shipping. That's code 50BGB at greenchef.com/50BGB. Welcome to the Black Girl Burnout Podcast. Kelly here. And today I want to talk about how to redefine productivity through pleasure, through joy, through nervous system regulation, how to create a world where joy comes first and work comes second. And really, this is an episode about dopamine anchoring. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But if you have found yourself staring at your laptop at the same email for the next 10 minutes, or you find yourself dreading waking up because of the long to-do list you have, if you have a list of activities you have to do, but you can't make yourself do it, this episode is for you. We're going to talk about the myth of willpower. We're going to talk about the biology behind how we get our bodies to complete tasks. And we're going to unpack the cultural messages that we get as Black women that will have us grinding super hard, thinking that we can reward ourselves for hard work later instead of rewarding ourselves in the now as we work. Let's start with the myth about willpower. How many times have you heard the messaging, like if you just think your way through it, or you just tell yourself no to that dessert you want, or that if you just train your mind better, you will be all kinds of productive? And while there is an element to willpower in everything that we do, we're making choices as humans all the time that have good impacts or bad impacts. But oftentimes, what gets forgotten is that so much of what gives you willpower, quote unquote, is actually chemistry. It is the chemicals in your body. And when they are functioning at optimal levels and when your nervous system is regulated, you have an easier time making better choices, getting things done, thinking clearer, managing anxiety and stress, all the things. And so the way that I want to talk about this is through dopamine anchoring and reminding you that as a Black woman, you can reclaim joy as the engine, not the reward for getting things done. So instead of beating yourself up and telling yourself, I have to do a thing a certain way, you know better, get up there and do it, we're going to flip that. And we're going to talk about 3 ways you can even develop anchor rituals that you can start today that will help you readjust your belief systems around working hard now and joy later, and give you the energy you need and the ease to get things done better and to get things done more efficiently and with a little bit of happiness to spare. So let's talk about the science behind why willpower is kind of a myth and what we need to be focusing on to get things done. And a lot of this has to do with dopamine and the fact that when we hustle and grind, we actually deplete our dopamine. which is an essential happy hormone in the brain that helps us feel motivated. So, very simply, chronic stress depletes dopamine, and depleted dopamine means that your motivation is depleted too. And this is really the opposite of what so many of us are taught as Black women, where we have to grind first and then you rest later. That we have to perform strength, perform resilience, pretend everything is great, and we just push on through. And joy is kind of this optional message that we get as Black women instead of this essential message that we need as Black women. And I know that so many women feel like this. I know I have felt like this. And in general, the Western world really is about this belief system of work super hard now, rest later, stack a bunch of money now and suffer in the interim. And then later, when you're older, you can do all these things and have financial freedom and sleep in if you want to. But the data also tells us that oftentimes when we have a grind first, rest later ideology, many times people who hit retirement age, when they retire, experience the highest level of medical issues. They often spend their time in retirement depleted, not finally energized to do the things they want. And for Black women particularly, where we are just now, I feel like, culturally moving into a space where joy is at the center of what we do versus hustle, we still have these messages that working and doing 55 things at once will pay off later. And yet, we're seeing Black women lose their jobs at disproportionate rates, particularly in the States, but it's a global phenomenon. We're seeing Black women consistently get passed over for opportunities. We see that there is an imbalance in all fields for income and the pay Black women get, whether it's in the creative fields or the science fields or business or medicine. So, is it really true that if you grind first, the rewards and rest will come later? If I'm being honest, in my experience, no, that hasn't been the case. So many times in my 20s, particularly, I really believed the messaging that if I just worked hard enough, if I sacrificed hard enough, if I just pushed a little bit more, that it would all be worth it. On the other side would be rest. On the other side would be achievement. On the other side would be these rewards that I was really striving for. And I will tell you, that just didn't happen. And if it did happen, it wasn't satisfactory. So in my 20s, I was full of energy, worked really hard, worked myself to the bone. I loved the work I was doing. I was a therapist at that point, and my caseload was like 300 people. And I was pushing and grinding, providing what I thought to be the best services I could give at the time, working late, thinking about work on the weekends, enduring all kinds of micro and macro aggressions and outright racism, sexism, sexual harassment in my workplace, and doing miracles, literally getting unofficial and back channel praise for the work I was doing. But when it came time to pay, I was denied promotional opportunities. I was often targeted and bullied by the people I worked with. The idea of grinding now and doing all this work and the reward coming later, I just found on the end of that journey nothing but betrayal and extreme, extreme burnout, among other things, depression, PTSD symptoms, anxiety. I spectacularly crashed out of that job. And that was my first kind of lesson that working hard doesn't equal these intense external benefits. I want to be clear. Like, I felt good about the work I did, and I think I gained skills and I became a really good therapist. But it didn't lead to any tangible reward, and it certainly didn't lead to rest. It led to a mini mental breakdown, to be honest. And so that was lesson round one. As I closed out my 20s and went to my 30s, I went to another job, hustled, worked really hard, was the best member of the team. Again, when time came for promotion, I was passed over. So much to the point that my supervisor at the time was so angry about that decision that they wrote a scathing email about how they thought it was directly racism that was the factor in me not getting promoted, though I did consistent good work and was an above average employee. I was like the gold standard. And when I tell you I worked myself into the ground for that job, I literally saw physical health impacts this time around. So now I'm a little older and my body is starting to decline. I ended up having to go to specialists. I was running around so much, I was like not even peeing. It was a crazy, crazy situation and job. I felt my physical safety was in question. It was insane. And then I learned round 2 the lesson that grinding first, resting, and reward later wasn't gonna come. But I still held on to that belief system because it's so ingrained in us as Black women. And so much, again, of what we think is ambition is really just conditioning from slavery and the global slave trade and the impacts of that, that you are commodity to work. You are not to be valued. You are not to be treated well. There is no reward to slaves. The reward is that you are alive and you are still doing the work. But we've managed to change that viewpoint and make it more socially acceptable. So my belief is Black women continue to hustle, continue to betray themselves, continue to delay any kind of pleasure or joy or ease to appease a structure that is never going to reward them the way they fully deserve. But I still believed it. So now we're in my 30s and I finally get the promotion. I finally meet up with a leader after I've, of course, again, worked myself to the bone, physically ill again, doing miracles. I'm creating miracles and creating a gold star standard of programming for the field that I was in. And finally, I had an incredible, incredible boss who saw that in me and was like, "You need to be rewarded for this. Let's get you a promotion," and got me a promotion. It was incredible. When I talk about gate openers and white male allies, this person always comes to mind as someone who genuinely impacted my life for the good. If this person hadn't closed off the barriers and opened the door for me to finally be rewarded for the work I have done, I can honestly tell you that I was finally getting paid what I was worth. I was finally getting the title I deserved and the doors that I had access to and the people I had access to because of this person and the subsequent decisions they made changed my life, changed my professional career. So finally, I'm getting the reward, right? I ended up quitting that job and going out on my own because what I realized was even when I got the reward, the thing I wanted, when I looked around and got at that level to see when I was in leadership, I realized as I sat in the rooms where the decisions were being made that I actually didn't want that life. That the life that I had been grinding for at least 15 years at this point was not the life that was fulfilling. I got the title, I got the paycheck, and I still felt exhausted and I still felt sad. And I realized that was what was facing me going forward. I would probably make more money. I would probably get better titles if I had stayed in my job. But would I have felt personally fulfilled? And where was this magical joy that I was supposed to be accessing? It wasn't there. And so when I quit that job, I remember saying to the leadership team that I wanted to live more and work less. And I remember their faces as I said that. Some of them looked at me like, "Girl, you are insane." Some of them admitted to me later that they were jealous that was something I was going to do. But it had finally clicked to me that hustling was never going to get me what I was truly missing, which was joy, self-esteem, and true centeredness, like knowing who I was. Instead, I was constantly chasing external validation, waiting for these folks to tell me I was the best. And trust me, very rarely did they do it. And if they did it, it just didn't mean as much. I was chasing my worth in my to-do lists and my achievements versus just standing in the fact that what matters to me is that I'm a good person, that I'm making a difference, that I'm creative. All those things weren't in the equation. I say all this to say, and thank you for coming along the detour with me as I explain it, to say that powering through burnout only left me empty at best, depleted and sick at worst. And I had to retrain myself and go to therapy and take my health seriously and all the things to realize that hustling through is never the answer. Let's be real. One of the biggest sources of burnout for Black women is money. Whether it's debt, divorce, home buying, investing, or just trying to make it to the next paycheck, financial stress is real and it's exhausting. But here's something that can help: the Savvy Ladies Helpline. It's free. Yes, really free. You get 55 minutes with a certified financial expert, no strings, no judgment, just real answers to your real money questions. Want to build wealth, prep for retirement, figure out how to invest, or navigate money after a breakup? They've got you. Savvy Ladies is on a mission to make financial education accessible to all women, and the helpline is a game changer. So if money is stealing your peace, I invite you to take one powerful step toward financial freedom. Visit savvyladies.org and book your free session today. You don't have to struggle alone. You can opt out of burnout and into clarity, confidence, and peace with your money. As someone who suffers with anemia, I know all too well how life-altering iron deficiency can be. Whether it's the overwhelming fatigue, the dry and brittle nails, the difficulty concentrating, it takes a toll. And then sometimes the supplements and treatments for iron deficiency have unpleasant side effects. That's why I'm excited about Citarol. Citarol from PharmaNutra is a premium iron supplement powered by sucrosomial technology. This helps your body absorb 3 to 4 times more iron while avoiding the common side effects of traditional iron supplements, the nausea and constipation. Citarol stands apart with 150 published clinical studies, unlike most supplement brands that have little to no clinical research. It's globally trusted and it's convenient. You can take it at any time, so there's no need to adjust your meals. It fits seamlessly into your day. It's 100% allergen-free, it's vegan and gluten-free. So if you're nodding along and I'm describing the symptoms because you are exhausted and your brain feels like it's in a fog, this could be exactly what you need. Join over 2 million people who have already discovered Citarol and found the help they needed. Head to pharmanutra-us.com and use the code BGB for 10% off your first order of Citarol. That's pharmanutra-us.com. Promo code BGB for 10% off today. So I had to go through all that to have the confidence to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. And at this point, several years post leaving that job and working for myself, I can tell you that ease and working through things with joy at the center, or at least in the conversation, has changed my life radically for the better. And one of the ways I have done that is through dopamine anchoring. And so what is dopamine anchoring? This is very simply, bear with me as we do a little science talk here, pairing a pleasurable stimulus with a difficult or boring task, so that you train your brain to associate that task with reward. So a pleasurable stimulus means something that you love and feel good about, and matching it to something you hate or find boring. so that you train your brain to be like, we really love doing laundry, even if you hate doing laundry. So, what does that look like practically? It means if you're a corporate gal, that you pair emails, which might be your dreaded task of the day, it tends to be mine, with a playlist you love or with your favorite latte or cup of tea. You match them. You fold laundry while watching your comfort show. So, even though you hate laundry, you're so engrossed in this show that the folding becomes in the background and it's still enjoyable. That you do your to-do list in the sunlight. Even if it's like you take a walk and you think about your to-do list while the sun is shining on your face, or you go for a walk and you hate exercise, but you think, "You know what? I'm gonna do some joyful movement with my joyful movement playlist, or I'm gonna call a friend while I'm doing my walks so that we can have this great conversation, and before I know it, I've walked 2 miles and didn't even realize I did it." And it's important to understand that it's not tricking yourself. A lot of times people phrase it that way and they misinterpret what dopamine anchoring is doing chemically, scientifically in your body. It's not about tricking yourself into tasks you hate. It's about training your brain to link effort and work with ease. That effort and work doesn't have to be painful and pleasureless. It can be pleasurable and easy. Because remember, when we talk about our nervous system, it's so important that we do the work to regulate it. This is something I'm very passionate about because the science tells us it makes a huge difference. And I believe so many of us as Black women and in the world in general today are walking around in dysregulated bodies, in bodies that feel like they are under attack all day long. And then they're coming home. If you're a Black woman, you're coming home and you're feeling still this level of anxiety around your family, around caretaking, so that you are never truly feeling comfortable in your body. So, learning how to do dopamine anchoring, learning how to retrain your brain to link effort with ease is about creating safety. And when you have safety and not shame living in your body, you're going to create consistency. You're going to build habits that feel good and that you can stick to. And this in itself is revolutionary because it's asking us to do that cultural refrain that pleasure is also in our resistance toolkit. So many of us have been trained through civil rights activists and the history that resistance often looks like denial or confrontation. And there are many types of resistance. I want to be clear. Sometimes it requires a sit in, sometimes it requires speaking truth to power. We have over indexed, I would say, or we've over attended to those forms of resistance and under attended to self care, joy, and pleasure. And I use the word pleasure with intention because so many of us have a very negative view of that word. So many of us think about pleasure in purely a sexual connotation. And again, that's not good or bad. It's certainly not bad. Pleasure and sex, they should coexist. In fact, sex should always be pleasurable. But we narrow that word of pleasure to only be in a sexual connotation. But pleasure is not inherently sexual. And even if it is, it's not a bad thing. Pleasure is something we should have all day long. Little bits of pleasure. And there should be no shame in having that. So often, and for so many generations, we as Black women are praised for enduring, not enjoying, for pain tolerance and not pleasure-centered living. And that living a life of pleasure doesn't mean you're living a life of selfishness, of distraction, of arrogance, and self-involvement. It means that you give yourself the space to feel joy anytime you want to while living your life and getting the things you need to get done. And dopamine anchoring helps us with that. It allows us to see joy not as a distraction, but as the tool to get everything done. There are times where people can be arrogant, selfish, self absorbed, destructive. And it's because they're selfish and just thinking about themselves and what makes me feel good. And it's only about me. But honestly, for Black women, I would say for 97% of y'all, that's not even possible. I think about the life I've lived, and for anyone, and people have tried it. They've tried to gaslight me and tell me I'm selfish, I'm all these things before. But for anyone to ever say that, knowing the life that I have lived and how often I am centering and thinking about other people besides myself is laughable. And I think about how different my 20s would have been if I had partnered true pleasure with the work that I was doing. That I have centered joy and self-esteem and groundedness in my 30s while shaping my career. If I had focused on that, how different my career might be even now. I don't live my life in a space of regret. I don't bother with that. It's not particularly helpful. But what it makes me feel is more passion to tell every woman I know to try to live a joy-centered life, to put joy at the forefront, because with joy comes generosity. And there is never a person who is joyful who is also selfish. There's never a person who understands what pleasure is and still becomes arrogant and cruel. And no matter where you are in your journey, if you're a teenager or way past retirement, you can start now. And there are many ways to do that. If you're interested, I'm going to be doing more of a series of this on Substack where I'll go into more detail, like different ideas, more practical applications. But the bottom line is think about the things that you can do and you can match that are pleasurable and joyful with things that you might be dreading. And ask yourself the question, what small joy have I been withholding until after I grind? To close out today's episode, I want to give you 3 anchors, like I promised, 3 anchor rituals that will have you practicing this dopamine anchoring today. And think about them as an invitation for you to play. This isn't homework or a prescription. This is an experiment. This is an invitation to play around and figure out what works for you. So the first one of the 3 is a sensory anchor. And that's about the way you start work that you may not find so great or you may find to be hard, quote unquote, and taking a moment to engage your senses. So maybe you've got to knock out some work that is administrative or you've got to be on the computer. Think about maybe lighting a candle or spraying perfume or stretching or dancing for one song. Think about all the things you can engage your senses in that are fun and pleasurable before you do the hard work. So you set yourself up, you set your nervous system up for success by engaging your senses before hard work. The second one is the connection anchor. And this is about pairing tasks with relational joy or relationship-focused activities that bring you joy. So what does that look like? That means calling a friend when you have to cook or clean, or taking them with you as you have to run errands. I know I've done that many a times. Something that got me through a really tough year was that I used to have to drive for long stretches of time, and I would call people and talk to them and have great conversations. Maybe it's sending a voice note to a friend while doing it, or calling a family member, or talking to your partner, or engaging your partner in the work. Some of my favorite memories as a child involve my dad and my mom waking us up on Saturday morning to 80s and 70s and 60s R&B and cleaning the house to music. They knew how to dopamine anchor without knowing the words. And even though at the time, if you ask me how fun was it to clean the house, not. But I remember watching my dad dance silly little dances watching him occasionally dance with my mom. He was a good dancer. Those are some of my happy memories. And all of it is because they used a connection anchor to be able to do these activities. Hearing my mom singing, hearing my mom close her eyes and enjoy the music. I remember the relationships and I remember those moments because of how they did them. So think about a connection anchor. Bring relationships and relational joy to the tasks that maybe you dread. And then the third one to consider is the celebration anchor. These are little baby rewards or micro rewards when you finish a task or you do something that is less than enjoyable. So the minute you do something that is a drag or you're dreading, do something instantly pleasurable, whether it be affirmation, a dance break, a snack. Maybe you have to do some shopping later that's for pleasure shopping. And so you finish your tasks for the day and then you go out and go shopping. Celebrate accomplishing hard work. So my soft invitation to you is to pick one of these three anchors, the sensory anchor, the connection anchor, or the celebration anchor, and commit to one of them for 7 days. Experiment and play. Have fun. Bring pleasure back into your life instead of making it a secondary thing. So as we close out today's episode, my invitation for you is to reflect on where in your life could joy be more an entry point instead of a reward or a prize? And what would change if the word discipline felt delicious? Think about journaling around these questions, maybe doing a voice memo, talk to your friends or other people who listen to this podcast. Ask them these questions, tell them about dopamine anchoring. And obviously, when I put out the next Substack posts, I'm going to invite you to answer that question directly. So if you're in the Substack community, please let me know. Remember and affirm, my joy fuels my consistency, and my pleasure is my power. All right, that's it for today's episode. Please share this with someone. We have never been more dysregulated, more distressed as we probably are now. Every Black woman needs to know about this information. Every woman really needs to know about this information. So share this far and wide. If you love this episode, send it around and let those folks know and yourself know that next week we're going to go deeper into healing our relationships with discipline. And how to make discipline delicious is going to really be our next episode next week. You can find the podcast on all major streaming platforms. Please, your reviews change my literal life. I cannot tell you. I want to share with you one review before I go. Somebody said to me, this is Princess PNM on Apple, that the podcast was real and relatable. They wrote, this podcast truly speaks to my soul. It's like sitting down with a big sister on a Friday night with a glass of wine. She just gets it. The healing, the exhaustion, the rediscovery of self. I love how honest and vulnerable she is and how every episode reminds me that I'm not alone on this journey. Her words are both grounding and freeing at the same time. Thank you for creating this space that feels so real, so affirming, so necessary. Thank you, Princess. I cannot tell you how much this review moved me. And this is just one. I'm going to continue to read the reviews as I get them as an example of what the community is feeling and how we are all coming together and how humbling this is. So if you haven't left a review, please go ahead and do so now. It is one of the very important things you can do that is free, that shouldn't take you more than a minute or two, that directly impacts revenue to the podcast. The more reviews I get, the higher ratings the podcast has. It impacts sponsorships and engagement, all the things. Follow along with us on social media platforms. It's real easy. It's Black Girl Burnout everywhere. That's on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and of course, my baby Substack, where if you want to go further above and beyond and support the podcast and the platform financially, $8 a month, you become a patron, and there are some goodies for you there. Okay, until next week, take care of yourself, take care of each other, rest well, and go out there and find your pleasure.